make sure you know that I'm not in the caliber of one of these great students that you've heard from the Woolf Institute presenting through this afternoon, who I think have been terrific. I'm going to present on this, the Torah, the Qur'an, war, and fruit trees. And that links to the reading group that Miriam has just mentioned, where we've collected from around the world the top professors who know about how the Torah and the Qur'an might link together, intertextual study. And we have them gathered in a virtual forum. We had one yesterday evening. We've discussed many topics. There are some of them. It's been really a terrific forum that the Woolf Institute have laid on for the academics to discuss these areas. One theme, just to give you a high level, running through the whole of the discussions, is that the Qur'an is in large part a commentary on the contents of the Torah, and it says so itself in that verse which I put out on the screen. I want to focus, though, on one verse about fruit trees in times of war. It's a verse which has never until now, to my knowledge, been commented on in the sense of a Torah-Quran connection. I wanted to say a limitation of my presentation in these 5 minutes. I'm not going to talk about, it would take me 5 minutes to tell you about all the limitations of this presentation. So just a quick snippet before I get going, and I need my 20 seconds for that technical reason. The Bible contains, this is Philip Jenkins, one of the professors on our forum, the Bible contains more violent verses than the Qur'an. That might surprise you, especially when it comes to extreme violent verses. And here we're talking probably about the cherem verses of the Bible, the complete elimination of the enemy, which does exist in the books of Deuteronomy and others. But let me first give some background to this fruit tree verse I'm going to get to. And that is that the Qur'an's worldview on the sanctity of life might be encapsulated by this verse, Al-Ma'idah 32. That is why Innahu man qatala nafsan, whoever kills a soul, it's as if he's killed the whole of mankind, and whoever saves one life, it's as if he's saved all of mankind. And where might the Qur'an, what might be connected to that verse? Well, there is a verse in the Jewish writing of the rabbis, the Mishnah, that came 300 years before the revelation date that Muhammad talked about. Anyone who destroys one soul from the Jewish people, it is as if he destroyed an entire world. So here we've got more or less a parallel verse, both in the Qur'an and in Jewish writing. Interesting, though, that the Qur'an seems to, while it adopts that principle and adopts that verse, it takes the Mishnah's concentration on what should happen within Jewish people and adopts it for the whole world, effectively. So now let me get back to this thing about fruit trees. Now, there's a section of the Qur'an in which this comes up, and it talks about the conduct in war, but it talks about fruit trees, and it hardly talks about any of the things you think it would talk about, which would be, protection of women, what you do with children, prisoners of war, how you deal with them. No, it goes into fruit trees, and there is a reason for that I speculate that we might come to now. Well, here's the verse. Whatever palm trees you cut down or left standing on their roots, it was by God's will and in order that he may disgrace the transgressors. So what's going on here? Why might this come up? Well, it's possible that the Quran was connecting the situation in Medina at that time to a Torah verse, a verse in the Bible in Deuteronomy. You must not destroy their trees even when you're at war. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Well, could it be that the two are connected? Well, as I mentioned, the context is that this is a Medinan verse when Muhammad arrives in Medina. And if you go to the commentaries on that verse, these are Islamic commentaries through the ages, you find that it was in connection with Muhammad's encounter with the Jewish tribe of Banu Nadir. And there are two basic explanations of what this verse is all about. Either the purpose, is number one, is to, the purpose of cutting down the trees was to humiliate or to disgrace or to degrade the Jewish tribe of Banu Nadir, because the Islamic analysis knew that they knew that verse. And the Islamic the Qur'an knew that verse and knew the prohibition about cutting down fruit trees. So it wanted to connect to that verse, or alternatively, a more recent explanation that if destruction of fruit trees is necessary for military operations, then it is lawful. And that indeed is something that you also find in the Jewish Midrash, 1800 years before. If the tree comes before you in the siege, you are allowed to cut it down. So what's the conclusions of all of this little verse? First, both the Torah and the Qur'an are very conscious of the ethics of war. And second, that the Qur'an engages with Torah principles on the ethics of war. And it just shows you, this is yet one further example, I think, of how the Qur'an connects to the Torah. And in that sense, I find it a nice connection, that these two are not completely distinct scriptures. They connect with each other. Another nice connection, if I can finish on this, is that fruit-bearing trees were indeed the focal point for a lovely moment of interfaith harmony when Miriam led us to Medina in Saudi Arabia, several of us patrons of the Woolf Institute earlier this year. I wish we could repeat such a trip like that right now. It would be terrific. Thank you very much.